Shall
we start?
Okay, great. Welcome everyone to UX and Visual Design Principles for Developers. My name is Lubina Bogoeva, and I've been in the UX design field for about 15 years. And prior to that, I was a web designer for a few years. I've been working on various industries, and now I'm an AVP of UX design at Chubb Insurance. And today I'll introduce you to the basic principles of visual design and how to effectively work with the designers on your team. Why is that important? It's because that's when the magic happens, when the design and the development are synergized, and that's when the teams build products that are not only functional, but also delightful. And I want to point out that a lot of people, when they hear UX, user experience, think about the visual design, but as you can see, that's just one part of it. There are many other specialties such as research and strategy that fall into the umbrella of user experience. So today we're going to focus on visual design and the principles behind it, what they're based on. So what do you see here?
See a person basically, a very unhappy user.
Yeah. And how much is this? You can use calculators. So the first one was based on your emotional mind or system one thinking, as defined by Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize winner and the author of this very influential book, Thinking Fast and Slow. So the first one, where you just show the face and you just saw it and immediately had the reaction, that was your system one emotional mind operating, that just instantly registers what's going on and provides you with the input. And that's what the principles of visual design are based on. And of course, there are many other books on that subject that explain recognition. So here is something like a real life example. Kind of squint and look at the screen. Do you see how many stars this retreat is rated? When you really kind of squint. And do you see where to click to book it? How about now? Keep squinting. Is it now a bit easier to notice the star ratings and where to click to book? So in the second example, there are about more prominent, and it illustrates the principle of hierarchy, which lets the user know where to look first. As you can see here, it's very obvious which is the title and the main keyword here. And now we'll look into how hierarchy is created through scale, alignment, balance, emphasis, and dominance. So it can be implemented in a variety of ways that actually play together. One of the most common is scale. That everyone is familiar with. Basically, the most important elements are bigger. When something is big, it's more likely to get noticed. It's kind of obvious. And this is really utilized in typography, where you offset For example, titles, subtitles in larger font. So even, when a person just looks at the page at a glance, they can see what is, what the different paragraphs are about. It's called chunking and really helps the users quickly orient themselves within large blocks of text and look for the main takeaways. Since, probably from experience, oftentimes people scan the site rather than read everything word for word. Probably you did that when you saw this slide. And that way they can quickly orient themselves thanks to something that's, very simple, but a lot of times is underutilized. People overlook its importance. And here is a more complex hierarchy in the Netflix example. So here the call to action is very prominent, is larger. The get started is larger than the other buttons or links, so that it's very visible. And here is an example from Target where the eye of the user is drawn to the product picture, verifying that's the product they want. And then the more detailed product information is on the side. However, the add to cart is very big and prominent, bigger than the other buttons. Another, and as you can see here, besides the scale, other principles are placed, such as alignment. This is also, both very common and also underutilized. So objects are aligned when they're placed in a way where the edges or central axis, if they are centrally aligned, they line up at a common position, like you can see below. And when something is out of alignment, it's easy to spot and kind of looks unpolished. So a good alignment is essential to make the page look polished, professional. However, sometimes you might decide to break that alignment and intentionally misalign something, such as in this example from Apple. And usually in order for this to work, it has to be very obvious that it's misaligned. Just like here, the tablet and the pen stick out so that they're very prominent. And that also creates a sense of dynamism, energy. However, and it really depends on the type of screen or application. That's from the same site on Apple, but here that's a comparison table. So here, obviously, everything is neatly aligned because otherwise it will be, very hard to compare things. So it really depends on what you're trying to communicate on that specific screen, in that specific area. Here they are centrally aligned, and also their bottom edges are aligned so that everything flows very neatly. And some things like invoices have specific ways. Obviously, they always have to be neatly aligned, but for example, prices always have to be right aligned to the decimal point, like on the left, and see how much harder it is to, look at the prices when the decimal points aren't aligned. Another important principle is balance, and it's kind of related to the alignment because it's about distributing the elements on the page so that their visual weight is equally distributed. And it's not necessarily symmetrical because that's just one of the ways to distribute the visual weight. You can also have it asymmetrical and radial. So here is a symmetrical example. It's very, again, neatly organized. And as I said, it connects to the alignment principle because obviously they're neatly aligned. But if you imagine a central axis, you can see that on both sides, there are equal numbers of the round thumbnails with products and equal numbers to each side of the larger product card. So everything is aligned and symmetrical. So symmetry is when you want to convey stability, a sense of tradition, a sense of orderliness. And in some cases, again, you want to break from that mold. And here the balance is achieved by having one big thing on one side, like this screen that juts out. And then it's balanced with this couple of smaller things, the title, the paragraph, and the button, and the logo at the top, so that the overall balance is maintained. It's just that on one side you have something big and like one big thing, and on the other side you have like a bunch of smaller elements to compensate. And another way to balance is radial balance. This is when things radiate from a central axis. And in this case, the eye of the user is drawn in the middle. So that's where you put the focal point and then goes from there. And another principle is the dominance. So that's essential for establishing the focal point. Kind of here and the other examples as well. You want to emphasize the dominant element. And the dominance is accomplished through different ways that more often are used in combination, such as size, and we already talked about scale. Other ones are color, contrast, positioning, and isolation. And so we'll look into them. Color is very powerful. It's connected to various emotions. And there are many charts out there that explore how colors correspond to different emotions and how they're divided into warm tones that project friendliness, warmth, more earthy, and cool colors that can project authority or calmness sometimes. So it becomes very complex when you really start examining it because it's very dependent on the context. For example, in our culture, Black is associated with funerals and bereavement, but obviously there are many, many other uses of Black that go along with it. So you have to, really know the culture and the context. For example, Black dresses and Black suits can be worn at any time and at any age and for different occasions. So it's essential to understand the context. That's where the research comes into play. Another way to establish dominance is through contrast. And here we have different ways to do a contrast. Usually people think of contrast as light and dark. But as you can see, besides light and dark and color, you can establish contrast in size, in position, in texture, shape, and orientation. And here are some examples. One on the right is the classic light and dark. But then on the top left, you have this bird that not only has a different color, but also it's positioned, to the end and it's turned into the opposite direction. Just like with the fish below, it's the same. Now here it's the same color, but just brighter, and again, it's turned the other way. So that establishes contrast and draws the eye. And the other picture on the top with the flower, you can see a contrast, not just lightness and darkness, but also texture. And the other ones deal with, again, the classic contrast, but the iPod picture also has this element of isolation. The iPod, it's like larger white block, but it's isolated from the black silhouette, and it really stands out. Here in this example, you can see how positioning and isolation are used. Here the car's colors are kind of blend into the background, but because the car is positioned front and center, and obviously also bigger, it stands out. And there is also this subtle contrast with the black birds flying around it. The watch video button draws the eye. It's the dominant call to action here, since it's white and it stands out, and it's also fairly large, so it's prominent in the background. Now, emphasis is related to dominance, but it's what you emphasize within that dominant area that you have established in your hierarchy. So it draws the viewer's attention to what's the most important within the important chunk that you have established as dominant. And it uses the same principles of size, color, contrast, positioning, and isolation that we use to establish dominance. And here in this example, you can see that the picture of the family is dominant. However, then within that area, we have the orange button to search. And then up at the top, because that's like the header part where the main navigation is, that's like its own chunk, own area of interest. And within that, the emphasis is once again on the orange search. And here it's established through color both times and contrast. Here in this poster example, the designer relied on many of the principles that we just discussed. So can you spot which ones they used?
Yeah. Emphasis,
Mm-hmm.
the alignment.
Yeah, it definitely stands out, and also the alignment is preserved. And then down below, turn off, there is the hierarchy of turn off is the most prominent as the call, as the main takeaway. And then the others emphasize what it's about. And then save energy is in white, just like with the white bulb, so it ties in the messaging. And now that we've looked into the principles, we'll go over the collaboration part, which is really important because, obviously we want to actually put into production what we've designed. And they are the most prominent ones are starting with sketching. And oftentimes in teams, the designers invite everybody on the team to sketch because people have different expertise and look at the application from different points of view. So sketching is a great starting point because it allows you to show what you actually think should go on the page and what the importance of it should be. And sketching is something that everybody can do, just draw lines, boxes, triangles, circles, and so on. But even though it's very basic, very quick, it really allows the designers to see what you mean, because when people explain, a lot gets lost. And that way, it's very convenient to keep track of all the ideas and also lets everybody share ideas that way in a group sketching session. And then another, after we've settled on what should be on the page, the basic black and white wireframes are like the skeleton of the page because here you can visualize in a bit more detail what goes where and how the hierarchy would work, but do it very quickly so that we can get feedback quickly and see whether we're on the right track. And since they can be done very quickly, obviously that saves a lot of time and money. And then the mock-ups are what is actually going to look in production. So here we have all the colors into place, the appropriate icons, photos, and so on. And the copies as opposed to the one that's supposed to go like as possible. And then the interactive prototypes bring the mock-ups together so that we can test them with users. I mean, we can test before that as well, but with the mock-ups, with the interactive prototypes, you can test the actual interactions. So here it's easier to see, when you ask the user to complete actual tasks, where they would click, what causes confusion, and so on, so that you can quickly optimize if needed and thus save development time. And now on to implementing it. Most of the companies use design systems. So it's a toolkit for both designers and developers. So it's like, are you familiar? Have you worked with design systems? So all of these elements that you see here, for example, the buttons, the headings, the page titles, the paragraphs, the different types of buttons, primary, secondary, ghost buttons, links, icons, and so on. All of them have a specific, all of them are laid out in the design system. It's like a site that you can actually navigate. And for example, here in this example, you can see on the left the different screens for buttons. You have a click on the primary button and you see how the primary button is supposed to look like, the color values, height, width, how it's supposed to scale under different resolutions, how the states are going to change, you know, like on hover or when it's disabled. So all of that is laid out on each page. So each element has its own page, and that way you can quickly navigate and even search for them. And when you develop, you can easily look up the values that way, so that everything is consistent. And many design systems, especially in large companies, take it a step further and create tokens. So when you want the button, instead of actually going into a Figma file or another file and pick it up that way, you use the token or you use the classes for CSS classes, and you just, you know, write the appropriate class, and that way all the styling of the button is applied without you having to, you know, investigate what it actually is. And of course, you have the design system site as a reference. And the current tool that designers use is Figma, and these tools change roughly every 5 or so years, to tell you the truth. But currently, Figma is the most widely used in the design world, and the designers create the wireframes and the mockups in Figma. All of these design systems are actually created in Figma and then exported to HTML to create a site. Storybook, by the way, Storybook or the Storywind, they're popular, as well as Zero Hide. They're popular for using for the companies connect to them to upload their design systems there for the developers to use. And Figma is what the designers use. So this is something that if you work with designers on your team, might often need to use, because here you can go as the design process unfolds and more directly collaborate with the designers and look all kinds of properties. As you can see on the right, you can see the borders, the positioning, thickness. It also gives CSS codes, so that everything is there in one place and very easily accessible to all. And in Figma, you can put comments and collaborate that way as well. So do you have questions so far about either collaboration or the principles? Great. Thanks for joining me today as we look into the principles of design and how to collaborate